First of all, I would like to welcome Professor Jagaram sir, Dr. Amar Agarwal, Dr. Ramamurthy, Dr. Harshul Tak, Dr. Vidushi, and all the audience for this instruction course. I will be presenting. I'll be presenting the Zepto technology to manage difficult cases, and Dr. Jagataram will be sharing the surgical pulse for managing the difficult cataract cases. Professor Amar Agarwal will be sharing the pulse for phacoemulsification in subluxated cataract and his innovation on glued intraocular lens. Dr. Ramamurthy sir will be sharing the managing cataract cases using the femtolaser phacosurgery. Dr. Harshul Tak will be sharing his experience on the phacoemulsification, black cataract and white cataract, and Dr. Vidushi will be sharing the phaco in the small people. So, coming to my presentation,
I think Dr. Pandey, it will be better if other people close down their audio, because there are echoes in the system. Only the person who speaks should be their audio should be on. Other can close down their audio.
Sure, sir, sure. So we can mute, everybody else can mute the system. Okay. So since the first lens was implanted by Sir Harold Ridley, there has been tremendous advantage in the tools, technology, and training for the cataract surgery. We now have the wonderful phaco machines, femtosecond lasers, Zepto nanopulse technology, specular microscope, optical biometers, OCT scans to deliver the best outcome. One of the most important steps for cataract surgery is the capsular axis, and the capsular axis can be done by using the cystotome, capsular axis forceps, a combination of cystotome and Vanna seizure, and recently the capsular axis can be done by femtosecond laser and the Zepto nanopulse technology. One of the most commonly used technique for capsular axis is 26 gauge needle cystotome, and using this technique it has several advantages, but in wide cataracts sometimes it's difficult to achieve the capsular axis, and it is not uncommon to see the runaway axis or Argentinian flex sign for the less experienced surgeon, or even with the hand of experienced surgeon sometimes. In cases of anti-capsule fibrosis, one can use the Vanna seizure and the capsular axis forceps, which can help to achieve capsular axis in capsule fibrosis cases. Now we have several tools available to us in cases of difficult cataract surgery for doing capsular axis, which include femtosecond laser, Zepto nanopulse technology, and some other recently experimental devices. The femtosecond laser is one of the most exciting development in the field of ophthalmology during last 5 years. Dr. Ramamurthy will be sharing his experience on managing the difficult cases using femtosecond laser. The other experimental devices include the laser capsulotomy, which is under the experimental stage right now. Maybe it may be available in next few years. And the another technique is thermal capsulotomy. So these are the experimental devices which are available, which will be available in near future. The aperture continuous thermal capsulotomy is another experimental device which can help us to achieve the good capsular axis. And this device have the centering point for capsulotomy, and this is the video illustration showing the how aperture CTC works for performing the capsular axis. This device is under experimental stage right now, and it may take a few years to come up for its clinical application. At present, the most commonly used method for capsular access is the Vanas, is the 26 gauge needle and the Utrata capsular access forceps. Today, I'm here to share my experience on one of the uh, another way of doing capsulotomy is Jeptorexis, which we have used in during last 5 years. The Jeptorexis can be used in the adult as well as pediatric cataract cases. We have done approximately 10 cases in children using the Jeptorexis. Today, this is my first case where we used the Jeptorexis in a 5-month-old child. As we all know that performing capsular access in a children is very difficult because of so many challenges. The capsule is highly elastic. Because of low scleral rigidity, there are high chances of the runaway axis, and it's difficult to perform the capsular access because of the shallow entry chamber and positive vitreous pressure. This is the technique of Jeptor access in a 5-month-old child. You can see the perfect capsular access, which is done in few seconds using the Jeptor device. The only limitation this device is that it has to be inserted inside the anterior chamber, and one should be careful while inserting this device in the anterior chamber, particularly in children, because it may cause some endothelial cell loss. So always use dispersive viscoelastic such as chondroitin sulfate based viscoelastic to coat the endothelium. And once you perform the capsular access, other steps are straightforward. It's important to perform the primary posterior capsulotomy and antivitrectomy, followed by staining of the vitreous in the using the thimerosal. And this is our second case, 36-year-old case with the hypermature cataract, intuition cataract. And in intuition cataract, there are high chances of Argentinian flex sign or runaway axis. So femtosecond or Jeptorexis can be helpful to achieve a successful capsular access in intumescent or hypermature Morganian cataract, particularly those cases who are planning for the premium lens implantation. Because for premium lens implantation, a successful capsular access is very important. And here you can see a successful capsular access using the Jepto capsulotomy device. Once the capsular access is done, then the other steps are straightforward. And in this case, we are implanting the trifocal lens in the capsular bag. And the advantage of the Jeptor access in such cases that one can achieve the central axis of approximately 5.2 millimeter in size, and everything else became straightforward, simple after performing the successful capsular access. Here, this is a case of hypermature Morganian cataract, which we planned for toric multifocal lens implantation. And you can see the Jeptor handpiece being inserted using the 2.8 millimeter incision. You can see the silicone cup with nitronol ring, and notice that the presence of cortical milk once we perform the capsular access. This cortical milk came out, and it's difficult to perform access with the cystotome, or there are high chances of Argentinian flex sign in such cases. So once the capsular access was done, the phacoemulsification was done, and then this was followed by implantation of multiple layers. This is another case of white cataract, and we use the intracameral injection of phenocaine, which is preservative-free, phenylephrine, and lignocaine, manufactured from some of the companies, Indian pharmaceutical companies. Notice that people started dilating after injection of the phenocaine intracamerally. We did staining of the entry capsule, and this is followed by the insertion of Zepto handpiece using 2.8 millimeter incision, and within few seconds the capsular access is done successfully. One of the limitation of the intracameral phenocaine is that once you perform capsular access, there can be meiosis of the people, or people may come down. So you need to use viscometriasis to achieve pupillary dilatation. And here you can see the phacoemulsification is in progress, and the pupil is coming down, and one can achieve the viscometriasis to achieve the good pupillary dilatation. So this technique of PhenoCane application intracamerally can be useful for selective cases of those cases who has allergy to tropicamide eye drops. And here we are inserting ultracert preloaded lens. Preloaded lens has advantage that this can be inserted to 2.2 millimeter incision, and it, the preloaded technology minimize or avoid any incidence of touching to the lens optic or haptic, and it also save time in the busy ophthalmic practice. So here you can see the lens being implanted in the capsular bag, and the pupil is smaller because of once we use the intracameral injection of PhenoCane in this case. So so these are some of the advantage. We always use intracameral moxifloxacin in every case. And in summary, Zepto precision nanopulse technology is very exciting development. The limitation of this technology is that one has to insert the handpiece into the anterior chamber. There are some studies done comparing the endothelial cell loss compared to manual Rexis, and the preclinical studies did not reveal any statistical significant difference in the endothelial cell loss those done by the Zepto. And one of the important limitations is the cost also. So this is all about my talk on Zepto. And
thank you, Dr. Pandey.
thank
This
you,
is
sir.
nice presentation, and I think Zepto. I think very few center in the country they do Zepto. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Professor Jagatram sir, who will be sharing the surgical pulse for managing complex pediatric cases. And Professor Jagatram sir.
Dr. Pandey, can I just ask one quick question to you?
Hello, welcome, Dr. Harshul. Welcome.
Yeah, I mean, very nice talk, Dr. Suresh. I just wanted to know what is the recurring cost of per case cost of Zepto, like how much they are charging right now?
Yes, it's very important question, Dr. Harshul. The one of the limitation for Zepto device is that it's recurring cost. Initially, they were selling it in 8,000 rupees, and now the cost came down to 6,000 rupees. But still, I think it's still a lot of money. And in order to gain wide popularity of this device, the cost would be, not more than 1,000 or rupees. Then only this device can become popular. The cost would be similar to the viscoelastic what we use in the cataract surgery. Because of the high cost, not many surgeons are using this device.
Right. And how about cases which have, like, say, very shallow anterior chamber, or like how difficult it is to use this device?
Yes, I think one should minimize or avoid using this device in very shallow anterior chamber, for example, nanophthalmos or those with microphthalmos, because this can lead to endothelial cell damage. And whenever you use this device, always make sure that you coat the endothelium with the chondroitin sulfate based OVD in order to minimize the cell loss. And I have done most of my cases, they didn't have shallow anterior chamber. But it's very important to keep in mind to not use this device in nanophthalmos or those with very shallow anterior chamber.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Professor Jagatram sir will be sharing his experience on the surgical management for complex pediatric.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey. It was nice to see so many stalwart. That is Dr. Amar Agarwal, Dr. D. Ramamurthy, Dr. Harshul Talk, and Dr. Vidushi in this instruction course. It is often said that fail to prepare, then you prepare to fail. That's why we should always prepare any of the thing for any of the even simple situation, not only complex situation. What is important? You have to diagnose any of the situation, whether it is simple or complex. You have to plan, you have to innovate and execute. And then after you do surgery, you have to have the follow-up of these patients. Because I will be showing you some of the complex situation. We have seen several of the complex situation, such as PHPV, microphthalmos with cataract, posterior lenticonus, double crystalline lens, and other. Here is a case of a posterior lenticonus, 12-year-old child with lenticonus. And this is operatively completion of the continuous curvilinear capsular axis and removal of the cortex. And it was, although it was diagnosed operatively before starting surgery, you can see the lax posterior capsule, where as usual we have to do primary posterior capsulotomy and implant IOL into bag and remove all the vitreous tractions. Here this is triamcinolone to identify the vitreous traction and to remove any of the residual traction. And here is that child, which I think you have seen long back in 2013 and sometime in the recent past also, child with double crystalline lens. Here we have done 2 continuous curvilinear capsular axis. I don't know whether anywhere in the world anybody has done 2 axes in the 2 crystalline lens in the same eye. And this is removal of the cortex, and customized IOL is prepared and it is fixed in the cartridge and then implanted in such a way that haptics are in the capsular bag, and it is amblyopia therapy, and child has excellent outcome. As you can see here, can catch the smallest of the object. Occlusion therapy is extremely important. Here is a high corneal astigmatism with cataract. Here marking is done. Child was cooperative for marking, and then we did continuous curvilinear capsular axis. And then hydrodissection followed by removal of the cortex from the capsular bag. And then here in this child we have placed toric IOL, and it is important to accurately place the toric IOL in the exactly right axis. So here finally it was placed exactly in the axis which is defined. It should have perfect alignment. And here is a next situation, that is juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Very, very small people, 360-degree posterior synechiotomy was done, and then viscoelastic injected, and then is the injection of the Malysian ring. Just to achieve adequate dilatation of the people, we place this Malysian ring, and this is followed by staining of the capsule and complete continuous curvilinear capsular axis. And here after aspiration of the lens matter, implantation of the IOL into capsular bag, followed by removal of the Malysian ring. Even small peripheral iodectomy was done in this child. Here is another child, 4-year-old child with congenital lenticular coloboma. And because there were posterior sanicies, saniciotomy was done, followed by continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis. And then we applied hooks to the rhexis margin. These are the hooks application to the rhexis margin, hydrodissection, and then removal of the cortex from the capsular bag, and then passing of the propylene suture and implantation of the ring, single eyelet ring into the capsular bag for the better stabilization of the capsular bag. And then we implanted toric IOL into the capsular bag. Accuracy is very important. Here it is accurately placed, and then these iris conjunctival hooks were removed, and finally suturing was done. This is just immediate post-operative picture before and after and precision of the surgical procedure. Here is another child with cataract. This is a child of congenital glaucoma where they have implanted the tube. This was a small pupil, and here also we used Malaysian ring. Adequate dilatation was achieved using Malaysian ring. Removal of the cortex after rhexis. And after removal of the cortex, IOL is implanted into capsular bag. And this Malaysian ring was removed from the. And this is the trimming of this long tube which was placed by our glaucoma team, and removal of the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber and from behind the lens. Tamponade was given so that there is no bleed during surgery. Here is PHPV with cataract. This is something not very common. This is a hemorrhagic type of PHPV, and here this is after rhexis. Then it is very important to cauterize the vascularized membrane. Almost 360 degree, and then removal of this vascularized membrane after cutting it with the micro scissor, and also cauterizing the stalk. This is a thick stalk, and then cutting it with the scissor. This is cutting with the scissor. This is a not very common type of hemorrhagic type of PHPV. And then is vitrectomy, and then implantation of the IOL. One can capture or place the IOL into the capsular bag. And this is after capture of the IOL in the capsular bag. And these are some of the other cases of PHPV which we have done. We have done more than 50 cases of these cases. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me opportunity to speak in this instruction course.
Sir, thank you so much for wonderful presentation and letting us about how to manage the difficult cases with proper planning, preparation. I wanted to ask you, sir, an important question. During the COVID era, there are a lot of changes in the practice of ophthalmology. And we have read your excellent paper on the idea of performing bilateral cataract surgery during the difficult COVID-19 pandemic. So what are your thoughts about the bilateral cataract surgery to perform bilateral cataract surgery in these young children in order to minimize the risk of anesthesia or minimize the risk of follow-up during this difficult time of COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, actually, the idea of a bilateral cataract surgery is good, but we have not done at our institute. We usually take one eye at a time,
Okay,
and
sir.
still we continue to do all these children with pediatric cataract unilateral cases of pediatric cataract on priority. So we have done lot of pediatric cataract surgery. Sometime we get more time for video recording also during this pandemic, because number of cases we may not keep as we keep in the pre-COVID era. So, but we have not done, idea is good, but we have not done bilateral cataract surgery in these children.
Okay, sir. Sir, I have seen one paper published in IGO. Maybe it was from a different group, but that's what I thought, that perhaps you had done these.
No,
these
we
tests.
have also published, but we have not done bilateral cataract surgery.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Sir. Jagatram sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon,
Sir,
Dr. Kapsul.
sir, it's always a visual
After
treat.
a lot of 1.5 years.
Sir, sir, it's really a visual treat to watch your surgery, sir. Always, always. They are all so meticulously planned and everything. Sir, I just want to know that with the capsular tension segment and all those things also available, do you still use Sioni only, or you prefer to use CTR with CTS segment, as it's easier to use CTS if we compare with the Sioni single eyelet or double eyelet? So, what is your preference, sir?
Actually, we use both. We use single eyelet where there is maybe up to 180 degree or less involvement, where it is much more dehiscence. In those situations, we use two eyelets, Sioni ring. We also use Ahmed segment, because that can be placed 100 degree apart, and it also provide excellent fixation of the capsular bag. So these are the various which are easily available. We use these, and where simple CTR we use where it is a very small segment dehiscence.
Right, right. And you are using sir, Gore-Tex suture or rolling suture, sir?
Although sometime Gore-Tex, but most of the time we are using polypropylene suture. Majority of the cases, because that is only used for those where we do transscleral fixation of IL.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Sir Jayatram sir, I wanted to ask you that what is the your cutoff limit for implanting toric lens in children, sir? How many age you prefer to implant the toric lens in children?
Ideally, toric IOL should be implanted in those children where you can place the marking. Marking is one, because accuracy of the marking, or you identify anesthesia, you place marking. But most of the time, those cooperative children, ideally it is said that 6 years or so, up to that time there is some amount of astigmatism which is stabilized. There are several studies. So 6 years is ideal, but we have done in some of the cases even earlier. Truly speaking, as I show one child where it was 4-year-old child. So, but ideal is 6 years or more.
Okay, sir. Any other question for Dr. Jagaram sir? Now I would like to invite Professor Amar Agarwal sir for delivering his video on pulse for phacoemulsification in subluxated cataract and his innovative technique of glued lenses.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my video there.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate both Vidushi and Suresh for such an excellent course which they've been doing for so many years, of which I've been a part of, and Jagat and Harshal for their excellent knowledge which they bring on the table also. So since Jagat showed another type of management, I thought the same type I'll take, a bad subluxated coloboma type of lens. Look at the problem in these cases. There is a large white to white generally in these cases. These are like Marfan's, etc. What we do is we've gone vertical. That means we are making your flaps at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock because we see which is the shortest distance available. Generally, it could be vertical. And Jeevan Ladi from Pune actually explained to me this, and since then I've been using this vertical glued IOL. So wherever the flaps are, you have to sit exactly 90 degrees from that. So now see, I've rotated the patient. That means the flaps now have become horizontal, though it was 12 to 6. The advantage is you will understand when I do the handshake technique, then only it can work. Now I made my infusion cannula inside. Now, a small trick which I want to tell everyone and the delegates here is, when you have these large eyes, do a small iridectomy. Watch what I'm doing here. A small peripheral iridectomy in the area of the scleral flaps on either side. The advantage in this game is, I can come now anteriorly, about 0.5 millimeter from the limbus even if needed, and go through the iridectomy. So I do not damage the iris. You see that sclerotomy now, gone inside. Now I'm very safe. Once you have done that, you can also do your vitrectomy, lensectomy through the same incision. And you can do this like nibbling a rat eating a piece of cheese. Now remember one thing, I don't need this capsule at all. All it will do is give me more distortions. These are progressive disorders. That is why I don't tend to do any of those rings or segments, because I feel these cases will be better off with the glued IOL technique. But then everyone has their own preferences, which is fine. That's what science is all about. Once you have removed the whole lens, now I extend my incision. Now watch, I've taken my 3-piece IOL, passed it inside the eye. Watch the haptic. It's a little bit outside the cartridge. Go in through the glued IOL forceps. Catch the haptic. Once the haptic is caught there, now ask your injector assistant to inject. Wait for it to unroll and unfold. Once it has unfolded, now I externalize the first haptic. Don't externalize till the whole lens has come out. Now watch the handshake technique, and that's why I told you I rotated the patient. Now I pass it from one hand to the other. This is the no assistant technique which was started by Dr. Narang. And here you see I've transferred it from one hand to the other. Go back through the side port again, through the sclerotomy here, catch the tip of the haptic and pull it out. And that is game, set, and match. And you can see there, both haptics there. Watch carefully the amount of haptic externalized. I told you it's a more than a 12 millimeter eye. That's a 13 millimeter lens, but look at the amount of haptic externalized because I came anteriorly, and that is the importance of this peripheral iridectomy. Now the rest of the procedure is very simple, which you all know about. All you need to do is create the Gabor-Chariot's pocket with a 26 gauge needle, tuck the haptics inside, as you can see there what I'm doing now. If both sides are tucked, all you need to do is see whether the lens is centered or not. One more thing you need to do is, if you come anteriorly, remember, you got to check whether there is an optic capture. How do you check it? You can always inject some air inside, and if there is some optic capture, it will happen. If not, you can leave it alone. But if there is optic capture, very simple, do a single pass 4-throw pupilloplasty. In this case, you can see there is no optic capture present at all, and the patient is very simple. All I need to do now is just apply the glue and seal the case down. So this basically completes this first case, which I thought I'll show you about. And once I've done that, I'll just move on to the second case for time shortage. And I thought I'll take another difficult case here. In this case, particularly when we are doing the phacoemulsification, you will see what's happening here. In this patient, as we are operating this patient, this is called the triumvirate technique. Now, when we started the phaco, you can notice when we are doing the phaco, there is a PCR, and with the PCR, there's a vitreous loss. Now, you obviously have a PC rupture, you have got vitreous loss, but more important is you also have a nucleus still in the eye. So this is the problem which you're facing. Now watch, this is the trocar AC maintainer which we designed. It goes 0.5 millimeter from the limbus, but it goes above the iris. See, I can't see inside. So this, I know, I can see it very clearly. I know the fluid will never go into any subretinal space. There's no question there. I now make my flaps. So I've got my fluid going inside the eye. Now I make my sclerotomies, 1 millimeter behind the limbus, as you can see here. Once I have done that, remember the terminology which we used was the triumvirate technique. That means there are basically 3 techniques here. First is the PAL. So we are using the modified PAL, and we published all this in the JCRS, in which I'm bringing the nucleus anteriorly. I'm doing vitrectomy also so that there is no vitreous present when I'm going to inject my IUL. While I'm doing that, I will also knock off my cortex or anything lying inside. Now, once vitreous is gone, I move to the second portion of the triumvirate. I'm going to inject my IUL. All you do is be careful, inject the IUL above the iris, but behind the nucleus. So you can see the first haptic has gone inside. Now my second haptic has gone inside. Basically, the IUL has blocked the pupil. Now, I have created my own posterior capsule. I have created the IUL scaffold. Now what we need to do is very simple. Use the phacoemulsification and emulsify the pieces. Remember, I've got an air pump on. So I've got a very deep chamber. So do not worry about endothelial damage, because it will not happen, because my chamber is quite deep because of the air pump always being on. Once that's done, all I need to do is remove cortex, and the cortex can be easily removed with the vitrectomy probe. So the problem is always the nucleus. Now dilate. Use iris hooks. I did not dilate before because I did not want the nucleus to fall down. Once my nucleus is gone, I am safe. So all I need to do is now take off my all cortex, etc., and remove all the peripheral areas. When you have done this dilatation with iris hooks, I like iris hooks because they're very safe comparatively and very easy also to use, but you can use any device of your choice. Once you have done that, then you can check and assess whether you have capsule or not. If you have capsule, put it into the bag, put it into the sulcus, game is your choice. But I always suggest to put a 3-piece IOL, because then if you don't have capsule, you can always convert to a glued IOL. So now what I'm doing is doing to the third part of the triumvirate, which is the glued IOL. So I'm going to now do the handshake technique, transferring the haptic from one hand to the other. Once I've caught the tip, I'll do the vitrectomy again to clear all this muck which you are seeing there, so that things are much safer there. In other words, the PC IOL in the AC is now converted to a PC IOL in the PC using the handshake technique. Again, second haptic externalized using the handshake technique again. Both haptics are out. Take out the iris hooks. Now all you need to do here now is tuck your haptics inside. Again, check, do you have any optic capture? If you don't have, well and good. But if you have, please on spot do the single pass photoretinoplasty, because you don't want the patient to come back again to you to the OR again for doing the pupilloplasty. Here you can see I'm just checking whether I have any problem here of any vitreous in the AC, anything. So ocularly you can check with triamcinolone, check everything there and see if everything is all right or not. And once things are all right and you see I don't have any optic capture because I've injected some intraocular pilocarpine also, I'm much safer now, and this patient looks pretty okay now. All I need to do is apply the glue and seal the case down. So basically what I thought I'll show you is these two cases. One, I showed you the coloboma. The second, I showed you basically a case which was the triumvirate technique. And nice seeing you, Ram, also. So basically, Suresh, I want to thank you once again for inviting me for this lovely course of yours.
Thank you, Dr. Amar. You can show third case if you wish, we have time.
Okay, then I'll do it just now. Then I'll have to share again. 1 second.
Sure.
Just a second. Okay, so since he's asked me to show another interesting case, I thought I'll show you this one. Okay, because he wanted me to cover up subluxations there.
Yes.
And subluxations again are a tricky situation to handle. So look at this case now. This is the intraoperative view. You're seeing a massive amount of subluxation. Now, when you have a subluxation of this size, if it is a progressive, I will go straight for glutathione. But if it is, let's say, traumatic or not a progressive type, we have this other alternative. And to be honest to you, this was started by Dr. Susan Jacob. Here you can see I'm fixing my rhexis there. The flap has been made exactly opposite the maximum area of the subluxation. Now you see I'm making an incision, a sclerotomy from that side. Now this is the glued capsular hook. Now this is a paper clip now, which is a better modification of it, where the capsular hook works like a paper clip. You can see I pulled it out there through the sclerotomy. Now this works like a paper clip. So all you need to do is made of PMMA, and it locks onto the rhexis margin. So it's a very safe procedure, very simple procedure, and can be used by anybody there. Morture is making this, and I have no financial interest in this when I'm talking on it, but that's the basic dimension of it. Here you can see now, once I've got my paper clip fixed there, I'm also using these capsular hooks to get better stability. These side capsular hooks will be removed. The one which is the center, which I'm showing you now on an animation, is this the way it locks inside the capsular bag there, will not be removed and will remain permanently. The advantage here is, here I can tuck it inside. So I can keep on pulling to as much I want. The problem when you do in a suture is, if you pull it too tight or too loose, then to redo it is a problem. Here, how much ever you tuck, it's in your hand only. So here you can see there, now the bag is very stable. All the rest of the procedure becomes very simple, because once your bag is intact there, all I need to do is take off my nucleus. Remember, I always use an air pump in all my phaco cases. So my chamber is quite deep always. Here you can see the nucleus gone. Now, once you have got that radial fixed, I want to give it a circumferential fixation also. So I'm using this endocapsule ring, which will give it a permanent circumferential fixation also. Now all I do is remove the cortex and implant any lens of your choice. The lens can be of your choice, because now you have actually, frankly, a whole bag of your, like a normal bag complete. These capsular hooks are removed. You can use iris hooks. The problem in iris hooks in this technique is it can rip open the rhexis margins. So if you don't have capsular hooks, you can use the iris hook, but be careful that they don't rip open the capsular bags. Now you can see that's how the end case looks when the case is completed there. I've done some stromal hydration, better to put a suture there. Now all I need to do is apply the glue on the scleral flap and seal that down. And that's how the case looks when it is completed. Now you can see this is the post-operative day one of this patient. The patient immediately is 2020. So this is the glued capsular hook, which I thought I'll talk to you about. And you can see we had published this in the JCRS. And to be honest to you, this is Susan's innovation, not mine. So I have to give her full credit for working on this. So I thought I'll show you this also. Thank you very much, Suresh.
Thank you, Dr. Amar, for showing the wonderful innovative technique, as always you do. My question to you, that you have shown very nicely the PMMA device, and it was coiled. So the advantage of this being coiled is that
you see, what happened is the advantage which Susan worked on is she had made it straight, but then she felt it coiled. It pulls it in better.
Okay, okay.
That's why she made it coiled.
Okay,
and been made by Morture.
Dr. Amar, it was excellent. As always, you always convert your thought into innovations. So I always like your ideas. This is not just because I like your ideas, and you always do something new.
Thank you, sir.
It's really difficult to match Amar sir's energy and his innovative ideas, sir. Amazing. Amazing. So much contribution and so much to learn from Amar sir. Great, sir. And I know Dr. Susan has been working on this device for many years. Yeah. Many modifications have come, and now it has become very nice, this device. So it's
but as you say, one thing remember, if I have a progressive disorder, Harshal, I still believe in glutathione. Because see, the problem then is in the bag. Yes, you know, I have seen cases which I have done, you know, glutathione, endocapsular rings and all, 10 years, 15 years down the road, they'll all be lying on the retina. That's the problem.
True. It's freely available now, sir, this device?
Yeah, with Morcha.
Morcha, all right.
Suresh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yes?
Yes.
we can hear you.
So Dr. Amar, the idea of Blue Dial opened up the door for so many innovations, and I think after your innovation of Blue Dial, so many new things came up in the ophthalmology, and that was fantastic thing. Thank you so much, Dr. Amar.
I think Suresh and to Jagatram, I just want to inform everyone, when Suresh was in America and then when he came back, the amount of paperwork which we did with him, and perhaps one of the biggest papers which we have published in the JCRS with Suresh was on no anesthesia cataract surgery.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And when we did that, it was done with the David Apples group. So what we did was we did 10 eyes of topical, 10 eyes of no anesthesia, and 10 eyes of topical with intracameral, and I didn't see the results. I just sent them all to Suresh. He analyzed it and he sent it out to the JCRS and it got published. Then the Americans also had a course on no anesthesia cataract surgery, and that credit goes all to Suresh Pandey, to be honest to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It was, we always get inspired by your work, the kind of, what you have done to motivate everyone in ophthalmology. And
Just one thing I would like to tell all the delegates who are listening is, please master the fourth row pupiloplasty, because in glued IOL, if you do intrascleral haptic fixation, you might get cases, and you will get, to be honest to you, many cases with optic capture. So on table, just inject air. If injecting air in the AC, you still don't get an optic capture, you will not get post-op. But on table, if you inject air and you see an optic capture, take out the air, shift to fourth row pupiloplasty, seal it on spot so that the patient doesn't come back next day with an optic capture and you have to take back to the OR. It's a very simple trick which will take you half a second only to inject air to see if there's going to be an optic capture. And to do fourth row plasty is again so easy, so anybody can use it.
Thank you, Dr. Amar sir, for sharing this important pearl with everyone. And now I welcome Dr. Ramamurthy sir. I welcome Dr. Ramamurthy for joining us today. And I would like to invite him to share his talk and his experience on the femtosecond laser to manage the difficult cataract cases. Dr. Ramamurthy sir.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Following Amar is always a tough job. It's like a calm after a storm. I unfortunately missed much of his talk, but I'm sure it would have been fantastic. Thank you so much, Suresh, for having me as part of your stellar panel. It's truly an honor. Femtosecond laser assisted cataract surgery in complex cases is the topic he has given me. Sometimes the soft cataracts, which can appear to be pretty tough, and I think even in these situations, using a femtosecond laser does help. Basically, it's 2 passes of the laser that we do, one at 1/3 the thickness, another at 2/3 the thickness, and basically we make 500 microns honeycomb pattern, goes so that the entire cataract is come to a emulsate, and with a very precise 5.2 millimeter rexus that has been created. Removal of the lens becomes extremely easy. Usually when you do a hydrodissection, the whole thing just slips out. And all you need to do is a bit of a phacoaspiration using modest parameters. There's absolutely no need for usage of phaco energy. And especially when you're doing a clear lens extraction in a hypo 50-year-old, etc., having a very simple technique like this would be very helpful. As far as I have started doing soft cataracts in a different way, in the sense that I create a sextant and subsequently I do not hydrodissect in the conventional manner, but after removing the capsule in a down-up technique, I go ahead and hydrodissect right through the central groove and then go on to the sides also. You could see the fluid wave passing through. And with the femto grooves that have been already created, with the hydrodelineation happening like this, what we did find during surgery is all these segments have been completely cut into specific pizza pies. And all I did was to remove some cortex and epinucleus that was there. And subsequently, there's no chopping, there is no lateral separation, nothing. All I do is to gently tease away the fragments that have been already created by the laser, but further delineated by the hydrodissection, so as to do this in a very controlled manner. So the so-called soft cataract can be dealt with either in a sextant pattern, or if it's an absolutely a pure clear lens, what I showed you in the earlier case, that is, you could just use a honeycomb pattern of about 500 microns each, and subsequently just simply aspirate the entire cataract out. Now, coming on to the other end of the spectrum, a hard brown leathery cataract, having a very precise, well-centered rexis of 5.2 millimeter itself is a great advantage. And in these cases, all I do is to again use a honeycomb pattern of 200 microns, cubes of just 200 microns each, and then bury the phaco tip into the meat of the nucleus and do a phaco chop. What I routinely find in these situations is that the amount of phaco energy that you use drops down by almost 50%. I strongly believe that phaco and lasers are not competitive but complementary technologies. Once the two of them are used as adjuncts to each other, you get optimal outcomes. And here, basically, what you're able to achieve is to diminish the grade of the cataract. If it's a grade 5 cataract you're doing, if you do this kind of a honeycombing of the lens, then it softens up to about grade 3 or grade 2. Initially, I used to combine this honeycombing with sextants or octants, but now I feel that just softening up the cataract, using the laser, and subsequently chopping the cataract in the conventional way that I showed does help. And one of the greatest indications for laser cataract surgery is an intumescent white cataract. As you see in this case, you can see the lens capsule bulging forward into the anterior chamber, and that's the laser that's been performed. And it takes 6 seconds in some, it takes 1 second in others. Invariably, I go ahead and use the dye simply because I cannot make out where the capsule is lying. In this case, as you can see, the capsule is lying free, and I don't have to do anything about it, and it just flows into the phaco probe as I start the surgery. As we all know, in these intumescent cataracts is a perfect rexis, which is the greatest challenge, and this is a situation where the laser definitely comes to help. But this is not always the case. In a situation like this, as you can see, this is again maybe a little less intumescent, but nevertheless a very white cataract. As you can see here, it's not a free-floating rexis that you have. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that, especially if there is some amount of capsular fibrosis, the capsule may be adherent. In these cases, if you go in with a down-up technique and just try to lift up the rexis, you might end up with a rexis runoff to the periphery and even wrapping around to the equator. So in these cases, basically the laser has created a template for you, and subsequently in the conventional way, going in with a 26 gauge needle, you are able to separate out the rexis. Then the hydrodissection and the rest of the cataract surgery follows. In these absolutely white cataracts, I do not do any nucleus emulsification at all because it doesn't work. But on the other hand, if it's a hard brown cataract, irrespective of the degree of hardness, it always has an impact. What about subluxated cataracts like this? What you see over here is 20 years of cataract. Patient had an injury at the age of 10, presented to us 30. There's a significant opacity, no zonules here, just a few fragments of zonules here. And how are we going to deal with this particular case? Basically, as might have been said earlier, the greatest advantage of femtosecond platform in this situation is to decenter the rexis, get a precise 5 millimeter rexis, not centered on the pupillary area, but centered on the capsular bag. Once you are able to adequately fix this bag onto the sclera, then the centration of this bag is going to be quite different from the situation at which it's presented to me. As you can see over here, it's a fairly soft cataract, and the other steps of the cataract surgery, whatever you're doing with the laser is just an add-on. The primary advantage, the primary use in this case is to precisely create a rexis where exactly you need it. Nowadays, I've actually given up making my incisions with the laser because I find that the limbal incision that I create precisely using a diamond knife or a stainless steel knife works much better. As you can see in this case, this is what you see under the operating microscope. Because I do not want any kind of traction on the lens capsule, what I do is to gather up the rexis in the center, going through a side port incision instead of picking it up with a down-up technique. You can see there is no zonules here, no zonules here. It's literally stuck over here with these few zonules. Partially absorbed cataract, been around for 20 years. And the good thing about this cataract is that this is not progressive. So if we are able to get it fixed on the IMAX segments, etc. But as soon as I slipped in the endocapsular ring, the entire capsule seemed to settle down quite well. And all I had to do was to rotate the endocapsular ring in such a way so that the area of the subluxation was adequately supported by the plastic of the endocapsular ring. And then I could slip in a single piece intraocular lens into the bag, and this was end of surgery. Another situation, a posterior polar cataract, often it's a problem, but one of the greatest advantages of the femtosecond platform, here what I do is to usually combine cylinder with segmentation, and usually this gives us pie-shaped fragments for us to remove, so that it's essentially separated into three cylinders are put in, and also 6 segmentation is done, and each of these segments is a small segment which can be picked up. This is what you see under the operating microscope. So using the external nucleus, the endocapsule, as well as the cortex as a cushion, what you are able to do is in a very precise manner, remove each of these nucleus fragments one by one. You can see this and the kind of the settings and the kind of power modulations that you need is extremely small. So you can make out that the posterior polar area, which is the area of weakness, which is the area of concern, is actually dealt with right in the end. And once you have debulked much of the capsular bag, in case some of the nucleus of the cortex is stuck to the capsular bag, it's even possible to go ahead and do a certain amount of hydrodissection or even viscodissection, because there's no longer any stress on the capsular bag. So this is the way it proceeds. You can see that the posterior polar opacity has also come in. And then subsequently, we go ahead and remove the cortical matter. As we all know, in a posterior polar cataract, the surgery is not over till it is over. You can get a posterior capsular rent at any stage of the surgery. So I am removing all the cortical matter in a very controlled manner. And subsequently, we are going to be implanting an intraocular lens. And that's almost end of surgery. Can I take a minute more?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a situation. This is a situation, as you can see, of capsular fibrosis, which is right there in the center. And again, sometimes it's quite challenging to create a rhexis in these situations. And as you can see over here, it's not a free-floating rhexis. You can see the capsular fibrotic part right in the center. And basically, it is stuck in the periphery. In these situations, all you have to do, as I showed you earlier, is to go ahead and remove those areas of adhesions from the rest of the rhexis, so that the rest of the surgery becomes quite easy. And that's the rhexis that has been created. And subsequently, we go ahead and implant a lens of our choice. A more severe situation like this, where you can see that this cataract again has been there with the patient for many years. The capsule is totally fibrotic. And here I'm opening up the arcuate incision that have been made right in the beginning. That takes care of some amount of astigmatism also. And here again, the rhexis, all we have is a template. What you have over here is an extremely thick area, and there's no way this can be cut with the laser. So basically, what we are not able to achieve with a $500,000 machine, we are going to be achieving with a 500 rupee scissors. But having said that, the laser platform has given us an extremely precise template for creation of the rhexis. And you can see that, and there is some amount of nucleus segmentation also that has happened. And even with the 26 gauge needle, I'm not able to separate the rest of the capsule from the area of its dense adhesion. So I go in with the scissors, and it's just common sense with the usage of the right technology. Sometimes the best of instruments may not work, but a simple instrument in your hands, the Warner scissors, micro rhexis scissors might do the job for you. And that's exactly what is being done. But the thick plaque of cortex that you see over here, the cut of the capsule that you see over here, is not something you're going to deal with. And that's the end of surgery, and I can go ahead and implant a lens. I think I'll make this the last of my videos. In a post-radial keratotomy situation, sometimes the laser has not passed through the areas of the arcade marks, because of which you may not get incisions in those areas, and that's the reason you have to pick it up. Because the first eye went off quite well, I went ahead in the second eye, which I did a week later. I just picked up the rexus, and you would find precisely in the area where I had an arcade mark, there's a rexus runoff over here. That's basically in this area, the rexus has not got cut. So always in these cases, RKIs, in case you are going to femtosecond platform, it's always a good idea to be cautious. I think my time is up. I'll skip this. So basically, as technologies and techniques mature and we have the femtosecond platform available to us almost for a decade now, the complications have decreased, competition has reduced the cost, outcomes and efficiencies have improved, and we are finding more and more complication applications. And I find today, femtosecond platform is more in use for the more complicated cataract surgeries than the novel cataract. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramamurthy sir, for enlightening us with so many difficult cases to manage using the femtosecond laser technology. And you have beautifully shown the various challenging scenarios like posterior polar cataract, post-arcade dense cataract, short cataract, and so nice, so many new things and new pearls you have shared to manage such difficult cases. And now I would like to invite Dr. Harshul Tak, and he will be sharing tips to manage the white and black cataract.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, for having me in your course. It's a wonderful course which we have been doing for many years. And this is the first time that because of this pandemic, we have to do it virtually. So I'll be sharing some videos showing the management of black cataracts and white cataracts. We all know that can you see my video?
Yes, Dr. Harshul.
Okay. So we all know that it's difficult to emulsify the black cataracts because they are very dense and very hard. And this is the case which had black cataract, and apart from that, it had a very fibrotic capsule. As you can see, I made a nick here, and you can see this entire fibrotic area which is there, which is around somewhere at the circumference of 5 millimeter, 5.5 millimeter. So what I'm trying to do here is making a very small rexus so that I can assess in which areas the capsule is very fibrotic and where it's free. So by doing this, I realized that in this entire area, it's a fibrotic area, and here it's a clear area. So now I go and use the micro scissors to give a snip here, and as this fibrotic area is always it's at the 5 millimeters, so I need to use the scissors here. I can't do a freehand capsulorhexis because it may extend the tear into periphery. So here I am just holding it with micro forceps and using bimanual technique, using this micro scissors to give a cut here from side port. And once I reach in this area, now to cut from here I need to make another side port on the nasal side. So don't hesitate to create one more port if you require, because the angle of the scissors can only go from this side. So here again I am holding the capsule and cutting it. So I've reached till this area. Now I just separating the capsule from the subcapsular fibrotic bands which are there, but in this side it's clear. It was good that this area was clear. So I just release these adhesions, and here I'm using the centripetal forces to continue rexus. And so once I reach this area again, there comes the fibrotic area. So rexus was a very challenging task in this case, But once you complete this, you realize that you have another challenging task of a very dense cataract down there. So, but the good thing about this fibrotic now capsule at the margins is that they are very strong. So here I go. So this is the drill and chop technique which I have been using for years and described this. I drill in the center to weaken the central endonuclear core, rotate the nucleus and keep on drilling in center. So what it does is it weakens the hardest part of the nucleus, which is the central endonucleus. So I drill down, and once I drill, I don't make a crater here. So once I drill, then I can hold and chop it. You can see I get a complete crack anterior posterior, and again dividing it to smaller pieces. So once you have done like this, you can take out the pieces one by one. So in the harder cataracts, drilling in the center, weakening it, and then chopping definitely helps, as you can see. And this completes the case. I implant the IOL under hydroimplantation, and this finishes the case. Now coming to the white cataracts, the intumescent cataract, as we all know, there is a liquefied cortical matter which increases the intracapsular pressure, and the chances of radialization of the capsular axis are too high in these cases. So if you try to debulk the capsular bag like this by giving a slit opening in the center with cystitome, there are chances that it may run away. So I use a sequential two-stage capsular axis. So stain the anterior capsule with trypan blue. I go ahead and make a very small nick in the center and try to make it curvilinear, and then I use a microforceps to create very small opening in the center. You see this whole liquefied cortical matter which is there. The central area is the safest area where you can walk around now. So I make a very small opening in center, and after you make this opening, you go ahead with 27 gauge cannula and debulk this. You see the entire liquefied cortical matter is coming in cannula. So you go from main port, you go from side port, but thing is you need to debulk before you try to make a capsular axis of definitive size of 5.5 millimeters. So I go ahead, and once it's decompressed, it's a child's play. You just give a snip and complete the capsular axis. See, I can easily play around and make a capsular axis of desired size. And most of these cataracts, they are very brittle, intumescent. So you go ahead, do direct chop or whatever technique you use. But the thing to remember is that these cataracts, they don't have any epinuclear cushion. So posterior capsule is right there in front of phacoprobe. So you need to be careful, and especially during the last pieces. Coming to Morgagnian cataract, another type of white cataract, the problem here is not of raised intracapsular pressure, but problem is here is of the weak capsular bag and weak zonules, and these capsular plaques which are there on the anterior surface. And moreover, the nucleus there is smaller in size, and it's freely mobile in the capsular bag. So chopping becomes tricky in these kind of cataracts. So trick here is to embed the phacoprobe, get it up, and do the horizontal chop, get your chopper from the equator. And once you get it from the equator, it becomes more effective. And moreover, you are away from the posterior capsule, and you eat up. This is another Morgagnian cataract. Make the capsular axis. In this cataract, there is only this small nucleus which is there, no cortical matter at all. So again, hold it. So you need to have a good hold here and chop it into smaller pieces. This is the last piece which you take off and put the IOL. So do I have some more time, or my time is over? I can't see the timer.
Yes, you have time.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'll show one more case then. Okay, this is another case of pseudo exfoliation and very hard cataract. You can see. So again, stain the anterior capsule. Now here, because the pupil was small, I decided to use Mulligan ring. So this is the way I use Mulligan ring to whenever I reuse it. I use this cartridge which comes with the micro lenses, which goes through 2mm incision, as I use 1.8mm Phaco Pro. So just see, the leading scroll goes and two lateral scroll, they get compressed in the cartridge. And because this was very hard cataract, you can make out it's a black cataract, so I put OVD, and I wanted to put a ring in the first place so that I don't struggle in between. So see, I go ahead and it goes through 2mm incision, and see the Mulligan ring will open up like it opens up from the original cartridge. So the leading haptic goes and engages the pupillary margin, the lateral scrolls, they come out, and again they one by one, okay, it opens up outside, but you can easily engage them. So one by one you may need to use bimanual technique sometimes to put the last scroll. It becomes a little tricky, but you're able to do it. So once you have this in place, you're very safe. So here I make a capsular access, and again see, I'm drilling in the center. So this drilling helps a lot in weakening this endonucleus, and then you can chop the nucleus nicely into smaller pieces and take all those pieces one by one, and that see, the capsular bag is weak, so you need to be very careful while you are doing cortical irrigation aspiration. Should always try to use bimanual IA. So this is the last matter which I'm taking off, and then you implant the IOL. So I think with this I finish my presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, for giving this wonderful opportunity to share my.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Harsul, for enlightening us with so many difficult cases, sharing valuable pearls of wisdom. And let me invite Dr. Vidushi, and then we can take a few minutes in the discussion at the end. So Dr. Vidushi will be talking about the phacoemulsification in small people.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is good to see everyone here virtually. I hope you can see my slides and you can hear me. So it is always good to check, and I hope even though this is very convenient, next year we can see each other in person rather than virtually, and we all hope that. So I'll be talking about phaco on small pupil, and we all know that has many causes, and it has always been one of the main conditions which causes problems for a phaco surgeon, however experienced or inexperienced you may be. And the risk of all complications that are possible increases when you have a small pupil. So along with the techniques that I utilize to enlarge the pupil for the surgery, you should also use other things like slow motion phaco, low fluidics, low parameters, etc., so that the surgery is in general much safer than nowadays. Now, the kind of techniques that are available are either pharmacological, where you have kind of intracameral drugs, etc., viscometriasis, devices, rings, and other pupillary expansion devices, hooks, pupillary stretch, which is becoming almost obsolete now, and a combination of these different techniques. So if I can show this small video, this is, if you have a small pupil, every step of the surgery, right from capsular, it's much more difficult because you have to work literally at the edge of the pupil. and the chances of fall multiplications. So you have to be very experienced. Along with that, you also have to be very lucky to be able to perform a successful surgery in such a small pupil, and this is not possible for most of us. So the different devices that are available are, number one is viscomydriasis, using super cohesive viscoelastics and different high density viscoelastics that are now available, like Healon 5, which causes viscomydriasis. But along with that, as the viscoelastic is washed with the anterior chamber, it tends to come back to its normal position. So we have to keep re-injecting the viscoelastic that we are using. And this will need, obviously take some time. And also we need to have low bottle height, low fluidics, so that there is less turbulence and the viscoelastic does not wash out very easily, and we can perform this surgery. But whenever the pupil comes down, we should re-inject, and then most important, at the end of the surgery, we should remove all that Healon 5, especially from under the IOL, because we have used such a super cohesive viscoelastic. Then the pupillary expansion popular in India because of the Indian Make in India thing. But Malukian ring is something that has been around for a long time. It comes now, and it comes with its own injector. So the advantage is you can introduce it through the main incision itself, and then as the Malukian ring enters the anterior chamber, the first 3 screws can be easily put in to engage the iris, and then we take a second instrument and ensure that there is a uniform pupillary dilatation. The other advantage is that it provides, sort of protects the pupillary body all 360 degrees. So there's hardly any risk of catching the iris while doing your maneuvers during the cataract surgery. So as you can see, with the Malukian ring in place, you can rest easy and all the steps become so much easier. There is no stress on the capsulozonular complex. The ring stays there. There is no danger of it slipping off. It is very well engaged with the iris and causes a uniform 360 degrees dilation. And then this is the IOL, which is being implanted with Malukian ring in place. So these kind of, there are many kind of pupillary expansion devices that are now available. And what we offer, of course, add a bit to the expense. All of them come with their own injectors, so you can easily introduce them in the anterior chamber. And again, in all these surgeries, even though the ring is there, we have to make sure that we remove all the viscoelastic, because these are all difficult cases where the viscoelastic is used more generous. Now, this is the injector. The same injector is used to remove the Malukian ring from the anterior chamber. Now, the first thing is that during the surgery, the iris becomes a little edematous. So the spurs are engaged even more tightly. So we have to first very carefully disengage all the Malukian ring scrolls from the iris so that there is no tear. And after disengaging, once the Malukian ring is free into the anterior chamber, only then we should take it back into the injector. And once we engage one scroll into the injector, then all the ring itself folds up and it can be taken out through the main incision. The main to remember that the edematous iris during surgery can cause tears, so we should remove it very carefully at the end of surgery. Now, pupillary expansion iris rafters were available. They are less commonly used now with the availability of the pupillary expansion devices, but they will not become obsolete because by the expansion there are some cases where iris have a role, like if there is an asymmetric small pupil, where you want, it is much easier to titrate the stretch on the pupil with the iris hooks. You can use it in a particular area where, suppose you're in an IOL exchange or some such maneuver, then the iris hooks are more advantageous. You use diamond configuration so that the interior where most of your phaco maneuvers take place. You should also remember that the subincisional iris hook tends to come off, so we should avoid rotating hook because otherwise the subincisional iris hook will slip off. And the disadvantages that we have to make for additional paracentesis incisions, the iris hooks may come off, so when we reinsert, we should not catch the capsular rhexis margin. Now, pupillary stretch technique more or less obsolete, but rigid small pupils, like there is now a distinction being made between rigid and elastic small pupils. So in rigid small pupils like post-uveitic fibrotic iridine, there is a role for the pupillary stretch technique because in these rigid iris, if you then use expansion device and it stretches stretches, there may be a tear. So it's a good idea to make it a little lax with the use of pupillary stretch technique. We should not stretch it too much, and the increase in force should obviously be gradual. There's no tear anywhere. And pupillary stretch technique should never be used in cases of floppy iris syndrome, and it should only be used or reserved for use in cases which are this kind of a thick post-uveitic fibrotic iris, because the pupillary stretch also causes a prostaglandin release, causes leukocytes during surgery. But it has a role in the kind of cases, and after we have stretched the iris, we may introduce viscomydriasis, or we may introduce iris hooks, or some even pupillary expansion devices. So as I said, avoid iris stretch in cases of iris syndrome, because once you stretch it, the iris will become even more floppy and will tend to come out of your incisions, and it will become difficult to handle. So this is only for some cases. Now, intracameral pharmacological agents like lignocaine, etc. This is a very small pupil. This shows for demonstration purposes that as you inject intracameral preservative-free lignocaine in this case, the pupil dilates. But this, of course, is a temporary pupillary dilatation, and we also have other, ready-made injections that are coming up, like Phenocaine Plus, etc., which can be introduced into the anterior chamber, and they cause good pupillary dilatation, and they can be re-injected whenever the pupil comes back to its normal position. So, along with the different things, we always must ensure that we have all our emulsification, low fluidics, etc. So to summarize, iris retractors, pupil expansion rings, and high viscosity OVDs are now available, and they facilitate in managing phacoemulsification in cases of small pupil. There are other quick solutions that can be utilized in the operation theater. Now, epi-sugarcane was something that was popularized long ago by Dr. Joel Sugar. This is a combination of BSS plus preservative-free lidocaine, preservative-free epinephrine. This can be used freshly made in the OT, but thankfully we now have ready-made solutions like Phenocaine Plus, which is available from the Entod, and this has a combination of phenylephrine, lidocaine, and propylamide, all preservative-free, which can be injected into the anterior chamber. We also have Oculan, which is basically intracameral preservative-free lignocaine, which is available from Sundays, and there are other things that are coming up. So these, and before all these companies came up with these solutions, we always had dialogarbitals by the cardiologist. So these things can also be used along with the pupillary expansion rings, etc., to provide dilatation of the pupil. And of course, all these techniques are for cases where there is just a small pupil. It goes without saying that you have a pupillary synechia and all, then you have to be very careful, release all the synechia before you use any of these devices. So to summarize, identify the potential problem cases periodically so that you are prepared. You have your rings, your pupillary expansion devices, iris hooks, whatever you want to use beforehand. And you also have explained to the patient that you may have to give a block admitted, increased timing for surgery. And so the patient as well as the OT team is prepared for these cases. Many techniques and devices are available. We have to use as appropriate and as per the case and as per our individual choices. Also do a gentle slow motion phaco. And also do not forget that even though there may be a lot of pressure to use phaco, do phaco, SICS or ECC, whatever you are most comfortable with in these difficult cases, because most of these cases would also have additional problems in the eye. So thank you very much and stay safe all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidushi. Thank you very much, Dr. Vidushi. And now I would like to request Professor Jagatram sir to give the take-home message to manage the difficult case scenario. Professor Jagatram sir and Dr. Harshul Tak will give the take-home message. What are the important things which we should keep in mind? And we have last, I think, 1 minute left, so I can request Dr. Jagatram sir to give the important message, to share the call of wisdom for everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. It was excellent instruction course, and so many wide range topics were covered, including Jepto and nanopulse technology and its REXIS, management of the complex cases of pediatric cases. And Dr. Amar Agarwal also dealt with the subluxated cataract and phacoemulsification and glued IOL. And I think excellent video shared by Dr. Amar Agarwal, Dr. Ramamurthy, Dr. Harshul, and Dr. Vidushi. Every one of them, they shared excellent video. I was watching that video by Dr. Harshul when it was a very thick capsule, and with the scissor also it was difficult to cut, but it was just excellent. And Dr. Ramamurthy showed complex situation and femto assisted laser assisted cataract surgery, phaco surgery. And I think it was excellent instruction course because time is almost over. So thank you very much for giving us opportunity to participate in this instruction course.
And
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to add
yes.
one thing, Pandey was that Dr.
Yes.
Vidushi has shown very nicely the use of malignant ring and everything. And Jagat Ram sir will agree that invention of malignant ring has been the game changer for cataract surgery for all of us. Like small pupil, any kind of small pupil, because of any reason, is a child's play now.
Definitely,
It's so easy to use,
Yeah.
so user friendly that it has made us heroic, you know. So we can do whatever we want.
Life is made easier. Surgery
Yes.
is also made easier. Complication rate has gone very, very much
Yes.
down. So I think it is a game changer. Whether it was Malaysian ring initially, now it is
Now,
Bhatta rings
yeah.
and so many others.
sir.
also.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So thank you once again, Dr. Jagatram sir, Dr. Harshul, Dr. Amar Agarwal, Dr. Ramamurthy sir, and Dr. Vidushi for making this course is one of the most interactive course. Once again, I would like to thank everyone and all the faculty members and all the audience for their participation. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Thank you so much for
Okay,
having us.
thank you, Dr. Pandey. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Vidushi.
Thank you, Dr. Vidushi.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
bye-bye.
so much.